I'm Ann Petrick, Vice President of Research for Vistage. Happy to be here hosting the latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. This series is designed to expand your perspectives on relevant topics, new challenges, and opportunities by curating the best expertise in our community. Our Vistage decision model is a research-based framework that captures the decisions that CEOs need to make to optimize your business. Technology, while managed and funded under the area of operations, is the underlying force behind many functions and applications of the business. In our 2018 research report on artificial intelligence, our data revealed that the use of AI among small and mid-sized businesses was focused in the area of business operations. And now in our most recent survey, we've seen a shift of the primary application of AI to engage with customers. When you think about the applications of chatbots, targeted marketing, creation of marketing content, writing sales proposals, and marketing contracts, these are all the applications we're seeing in the area of customer engagement. Now, some other data, our Q1 CEO Confidence Index survey that was conducted in March revealed that 1/3 of businesses were not testing or using new AI capabilities such as ChatGPT. And despite a lot of traction in this technology over the last 3 months, our latest research conducted earlier this month revealed that that figure has not changed. So to help CEOs think about how they can take advantage of emerging technologies in AI, we have launched the Artificial Intelligence Resource Center and Network for our Vistage members back in May. Today, our focus is to reframe the whole spectrum of what AI means for small and mid-sized businesses, with insights from a panel of Vistage speakers here to share their unique expertise. And not only do they speak to members regularly, they are experts in their field and invite you to connect with them for more information. Today, I'd like to welcome Ross Hartmann, Amy Goldsmith, and David Karandish. We'll hear from each of the panelists, have a discussion, and then open up the floor to any questions. So please be sure to use the Q&A box for any questions. If they're directed at any particular speaker, please be sure to designate that as well. So first, we're going to hear from David Karandish. David, as a leader of a software as a service company, you help companies leverage AI. Help us frame up types of AI and automation and the problems that they solve for businesses.
Yeah, Ann, first of all, thanks for having me here. David Karandish, CEO and co-founder of Capacity. When I think about how people are utilizing AI, I think about it really in two buckets. First, you've got AI internally for your team, helping your team with things like IT, HR, onboarding, training, anywhere where you can make your operations more efficient. And then we've got folks using AI externally for your customers, reducing customer support calls, answering questions on your website, doing lead generation on your site. And so those are kind of the two big broad buckets. And if I was going to go down a layer deeper, we've seen a big distinction between how people are using automation, AI, and now generative AI to help impact their organizations. So my kind of layman's term for this is I think of automation as software that runs in an uninterrupted fashion. You could almost think of automation as a proxy for outsourced manual labor, versus AI itself is more software that learns. And I think of that as a proxy for outsourced cognitive labor. And then ultimately, generative AI is software that creates new content based on existing data. It becomes a proxy for outsourced creative labor. And so we're seeing companies from large and small implementing both automation, AI, and generative AI to go solve problems like, when will my order ship? Have the AI read the email, have the automation connect to the key system, and have the generative AI write the response back. So those are kind of the two big frameworks we see. Are you working internal for your team or external for your customers? And then which flavor of AI and automation are you interested in? Automating a task, manual labor, automating cognitive labor, automating creative labor.
Excellent. So those are three big buckets that we look at in terms of how AI can help small and mid-sized businesses. What are you seeing the biggest trend in? Obviously, the cognitive labor is the growing with the generative AI, and ChatGPT is really taken off lately.
Yeah, so I kind of think about it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the very baseline needs within the organization are, can we support our team and our customers, whether that's onboarding and training or whether that's external customer support. And so I think very similar to when the internet was first coming out, like, you don't want to be the last company with a website. You don't want to be the last company with an AI on your site. We have clients that are telling us that their customers and their team members are choosing to either work with them or work for them based on the AIs that they've employed, which is kind of interesting. Another trend we've seen is that companies are now saying, we're not going to pull this from our tech budget. We're actually going to pull this from our hiring budget. Our next hire is an AI. So it's a very different framework from historical, run this through IT. It's like, your next hire should be an AI bot.
It was interesting. In our survey, we asked about the impact to personnel, and over half of our members report that they are not planning that there's any sort of impact, but the next in line was that they're training existing personnel on how to use AI and leveraging it in the business. So that seems to be primarily, I know we've heard a lot of things about, can this be cost saving? Is this an opportunity to almost replace human resources, or not even, solve the talent and labor gap that we've been experiencing? But it seems like it's the primary purpose is around improving the productivity of the people that are in the organization today.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So you framed up the types of automation, and next we're going to hear from Ross Hartmann, whose expertise is in integrating the latest AI technology in businesses and helping them navigate the rapidly evolving tech industry. So he'll share some deeper practical applications. Welcome, Ross.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. I'm really excited to be here. So to build on that, a little bit about myself. Yeah, I'm the founder of a company called Kingo AI. We offer AI consulting services to companies, and I've helped companies from 2 million to 500 million design and implement an AI strategy. And on top of that, we help companies identify practical applications of AI, and we offer custom AI software. So I thought this was pretty interesting. According to a recent Checker survey, 85% of American workers say that they've used AI tools to perform tasks at work. Now you might be saying, that seems too high. Like, certainly 85% of my workforce isn't using AI today. But from that same survey, this was interesting as well. 69% of American workers say they're afraid to tell their managers about their AI use for fear of being replaced by the tools they're using. So AI is not something that's coming, it's something that's already here, and we need to openly discuss it. So today I want to focus on some practical applications of AI in our businesses. I want to touch on what large language models are, how AI works as a co-pilot versus as an autonomous agent, how it can be used to increase employee retention, and how it's already being used by companies today. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about the value of giving your company an AI brain. So today, I'm going to focus on large language models, which are a subset of generative AI. I know David was talking about that a little bit. Generative AI can create human-like content. And you may have heard of ChatGPT or Google's Bard or Anthropic's Claude. These are all large language models. So large language models give computers and machines the ability to understand and create human-like text. So for anyone who may not be familiar with ChatGPT, maybe you've heard about it, but you don't know exactly what it does. It's essentially a digital assistant. Overnight, we've all been given these digital assistants that can read, they can write, they can summarize, they can analyze, brainstorm, they can even help us problem solve. And by using ChatGPT on a daily basis, we see massive productivity gains across our organizations. So there are two ways I like to think of AI on top of what David was saying. I think it's very well seen as kind of that internal and external tool. But I also like to think of it as a co-pilot, which is kind of a thing that sits on your computer screen on the right-hand side, kind of all day long, that you can use it to draft emails, to analyze contracts, summarize industry news, and help you solve problems. And in our businesses, using ChatGPT as a co-pilot is probably the fastest thing you can do to see those massive productivity gains in your workforce. It's kind of the lowest hanging fruit. But the other application of AI is as an autonomous agent. It's where we implement AI inside our company's workflows to begin to completely automate repetitive tasks and even menial data tasks. Now, obviously, there are massive productivity benefits to using AI as both a co-pilot and an autonomous agent, but there's an additional benefit here that I think we may not all be fully appreciating. And that's that it frees up employees to focus on more creative tasks and to think more strategically. And by doing that, employees can focus on the tasks that they actually enjoy, which can increase employee retention and obviously decrease turnover. So one of the most common questions I get as a speaker for Vistage groups is, what are other companies doing with AI today? So I want to go over a few of those practical applications and where I'm seeing companies implement it on a daily basis. And first of all, this is generative AI, right? It's used for generating content. So it can help us generate job descriptions, blog posts, social media posts, product descriptions, employee handbooks. And that's literally just the start. There are literally hundreds of applications for content creation. We can use it for drafting emails, analyzing emails and extracting action items, or even taking meeting notes and providing us summaries, pulling out those action items and sending them to relevant participants. We can use AI-powered customer support to answer client questions. You can use AI to help with resume screening. I know past resume screening tools have been very keyword-based, phrase-based, but this AI now can help with a holistic understanding of which applications are most suited to a job description. And then it can help us with project management for setting reminders, creating estimates, scheduling, reporting on project statuses. A lot of companies have been interested in doing a follow-up, automated follow-up on AR, creating customized onboarding and training material. It can help us with contract review and contract analysis. I mean, basically, wherever there's knowledge work, large language models can likely help in some way. I know it's a long list, but honestly, it's not even touching the number of things you can possibly do with this technology, which is why it's so revolutionary. So that's in the area of productivity and efficiency, but there's also data insights, right? So imagine you take this technology and you connect it to your CRM, your ERP, your document store, your e-commerce database, your manufacturing database. You can ask for insights about trends. You can identify anomalies, or you could find variables that are positively correlated. And by using AI in this way, you can have it create predictions, maybe based on your sales data, based on your inventory. Anything you can put into Excel format, you can extract data insights from. So the other cool thing is you can use it to identify data in unstructured patterns or insights out of unstructured data. So for instance, you could feed in all your customer support tickets or all of these emails and say, why are people upset with our product or service? Or why are they confused? Or why are they grateful? And then on top of that, you can use it to gather market intelligence, competitive intelligence, stay on top of industry news, be alerted to product announcements and when competitors are posting to jobs. That's a bit in the data insights area. Again, a lot there, right? But you can also use it for customer experience. So making more responsive communication to your clients, creating website chatbots. I know we talked a little bit about that to kind of improve customer journeys, have them find products that they wouldn't otherwise find. We can unlock translation. And here's where I'm most excited, is unlocking new revenue opportunities. So we all know that it can probably help us reduce expenses, improve productivity, but it can also be used to give us things like recommendation systems that can help giving upselling opportunities or help increase average order size. You can use it for sales enablement so that all your sales representatives have this co-pilot that sits alongside them that is able to help them respond to objections in real time. Or you could use it for churn prediction and say, when will customers unsubscribe from our service, and anticipate that and reach out before they do. You could use it for fraud detection, or of course, even offering AI-powered services directly to your clients. So that's a brief look at how companies are using AI today. But now I want to talk about the future. What does the next phase of AI look like? So imagine that you had one interface in your company where you could ask questions. You could say, what were our sales numbers last quarter? Or what's the status of that marketing project? Or where are we running low on inventory? And what are the action items from that meeting? Were those ever completed? This is the ultimate application of AI, and it's in making all of your company's data accessible in one place through an AI brain. It's one interface that can give you true transparency into how your company works today and how to make it more efficient going forward. So I've worked with companies to help give them these AI brains. And in that work, I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to be the biggest competitive advantage over the next decade. And I know I'm a bit limited on time, so I just want to make sure I say a few things that we talked about today. We talked about co-pilots versus autonomous agents, how companies are using AI today, and how to practically apply AI in your organization. But I want to finish up by saying this. There's this phrase going around in the AI community, and that's essentially that AI isn't going to replace you, but a person using AI will. And that's true for companies as well. It's true that companies that implement AI today are going to see a massive competitive advantage. But the other interesting thing is that soon it won't be an advantage, it'll be a necessity. So I'd encourage everyone on the call to answer this question. What can I do to capture this competitive advantage and move one step closer to AI today? And hopefully those 69% of employees who are afraid to open up about their AI use will feel more comfortable finding new ways to apply AI in your organization.
Thank you so much, Ross. And I think, great points on how it can be leveraged. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I've seen a lot of the applications that we use today actually now have AI features embedded in them, like Grammarly, things like that. So is that what we're going to start seeing, is that the current applications that we're using are going to have some of these functions that help us get there?
Yeah, well said. So Microsoft recently announced they're going to be deploying this in 365. I know Salesforce already has their version. HubSpot has released certain features. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which is the creator of ChatGPT, Sam Altman recently said that, I don't know if anyone's familiar, ChatGPT allows you to have plugins. So you can kind of use like Zapier inside of ChatGPT. You can upload PDFs, that kind of thing. But he was saying he thought that companies wanted their features in ChatGPT. But what it's turning out to be is that companies want ChatGPT inside their products. Exactly. So your point is exactly right. We're just going to continue to see generative AI arrive in existing products.
Fascinating. Well, and I've been experimenting with it myself, really trying to, and it does definitely aggregate a lot of research and insights very quickly. Tell us a little bit about the learning. It has information from before 2021. Is that correct? And do you think there's going to be a catch-up period?
Really good question. So, and I get this question a lot when I'm speaking to groups, and that's because it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? But it's a technical limitation that has to do with the way that the technology is trained. So essentially, they take a snapshot of the internet, OpenAI in this instance, and it just so happened to be from September 2021. There's nothing particularly special about that date. It's just when they took a snapshot of the internet. They take that data, they feed it into a model, and they ask the model to make predictions about which words follow which other words, to find sequences and patterns in the data. And as part of that, that's how it completes the text and gives us the responses. So there's obviously a limitation as far as that goes. Like if we wanted to ask about the Silicon Valley banking crisis, the model doesn't know about that inherently. So you have to augment that through a browser-based tool. So in ChatGPT, if you get the paid version, essentially you can use the browser model to ask questions and kind of fill in recent information. You can also use Bing. Google's Search Labs now have the ability, if you turn on the beta feature, now has the ability to have generative AI in there. Perplexity is also a great tool for doing research. And obviously there's data privacy in mind. I know Amy's going to talk about this. This is going to be huge, but it's also a question that I get a lot from companies.
Yes. Well, I think we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. And so Ross, thank you. I think that's a great segue for Amy to terrify us with some of those security implications. There's so much questions here today around security, ownership of content, and help us understand legal risks and considerations for protecting confidential data and original IP.
Sure. So first, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Tessa. And I'm really happy to participate with Ross and David today. So I'm Amy Goldsmith. I'm co-chair of the Privacy and Cybersecurity Group at Charter Krinsky and Drogan. So I call this AI, oh my, guidelines regarding use of AI risks and rewards. So when we're looking at any open AI product like ChatGPT or Midjourney or Deviant, any of the common products that people are using, first of all, with regard to confidentiality, none of the inputs are confidential yet. If you're building your own system, that's now about open systems. So if you have a non-disclosure agreement or other kind of agreement where you have to keep the information that you've been given confidential, or it's information that's confidential within your own company, and you put it into OpenAI or something else, like some certain Samsung employees did a while back, you're breaching confidentiality. So the first piece of advice is don't put any confidential content into any of these open products, because that has legal risks. If someone like Ross is building your own instance, that's a different story. But step one for us is any input that you put in, completely not confidential. Now, let's look at the outputs. Any output you receive, depending on how well you put in your queries, may be identical to someone else's output. So it's really important to have very complicated outputs in a way that dictate what you in your business particularly need. And I think Ross put up some really good guidelines a couple of days ago. So your marketing material, your press releases should be curated by a human. And someone asked about ownership before. You retain ownership of the output, but that doesn't mean that you can copyright the output. The Copyright Office's position is that the output isn't capable of copyright protection unless it is sufficiently transformed by a human. And more about that a little bit later. Ross also said hallucinations. So the database used by ChatGPT is not verified. It's everything that was in the internet as of 2021. And everyone knows that everything in the internet is absolutely truthful, right? Not so fast. Even the terms and conditions of ChatGPT say that they may hallucinate, which means they're making up information when it can't determine the correct answer, or when there isn't enough information in the data set to give a good answer. So you've got to fact check with a reliable source before you use any of these OpenAI tools. There was a mayor in Australia who was a whistleblower in a banking scandal, and he was labeled by ChatGPT as a felon who had served time in jail. The mayor may sue OpenAI for defamation. So we have to be really careful how we're using it, what we're getting out. Recently, for any lawyers in the room, a New York federal judge sanctioned 2 lawyers who submitted a legal brief written by ChatGPT, and it included citations of non-existent court cases. So they didn't look at it, they didn't curate it, they didn't do anything. They just pushed it in, pulled it out, filed it in court. Each of them has to pay a $5,000 fine. The attorneys and their law firm were ordered to notify each judge falsely identified as the author of those non-existent cases and about the sanction. And the judge said, you know, if you had come clean at the very beginning, I might not have sanctioned you. So we have to be really careful with regard to what use case how we're using the output. So advice, fact check every output. And there are fact checkers now built in. So we'll see what happens. You mentioned privacy. Inputting personal data, also called personally identifiable information, is not advisable. So that information, if you put it in, can be processed and used by the platform to generate outputs. And even though Private GPT provides a privacy layer, it's designed to redact sensitive information. Masked AI is another one designed to mask sensitive data. But again, the better course of action, lowering your risk, is not to put in PD or PII at all. All of these models are subject to privacy laws. Now, you may have heard that Sam Altman was before Congress with several other people and begging Congress to take action and give us a law that makes sense to regulate. Whether they do or not, I'm not going to opine. I can tell you that the European Union is going to get there way faster than the US. And all of these models are international models. They're subject to existing rules such as the GDPR, and they're going to be subject to the generative AI rules that the European Union is actually considering right now. It's called the AI Act. So they are going to implement a full, assuming they pass it, a full ban on artificial intelligence for biometric surveillance, emotional recognition, predictive policing. So that will be a complete ban in the European Union. Generative AI would have to comply with transparency requirements. You'd have to disclose that the content was generated by AI. So of course, this has an implication for how it's being used. You have to design the model to prevent it from generating illegal content. Think about that. Designing a model so it's not generating illegal content. I don't think people are going to be replaced by AI. I think people are going to have more jobs based on AI. And publishing summaries of copyrighted data used for training. So really interesting with regard to what the EU is going to do. Again, I think they're going to get there way faster than the US. Now, just in the next 2 minutes, I want to go over copyrights and patents. There is a class action suit brought by artists against AI image providers, such as Stability AI, Midjourney, and DeviantArt. And the artists assert something really interesting. They say, simply using the database in the process of creating a work is the basis for an infringement claim. Just the use of the database. Now, this is a very interesting legal theory. Don't know whether it will fly or not. We'll see. Getty Images sued Stability AI for direct copyright infringement based on its copying of Getty Images photos. That's a more traditional copyright approach. Now, let's say you use generative AI. Let's say you use Midjourney or DeviantArt to generate a work. Let's say it's a plush toy with wide eyes and 2 ears and 6 legs. And you submit that to the Copyright Office. And you say, well, I created this using AI. Copyright Office is going to say, nope, stop, not registrable. Why? Because the Copyright Office requires human authorship. Copyright Office right now is undergoing a listening tour. It's listening to artists, it's listening to owners, it's listening to everyone to figure out how to finesse this. What they've said so far is if you can point out what AI did and what you did, and you're completely transparent with us when you file the application, well, then we'll give you a copyright for what you created, not what AI created, what you created. My question to all of you users is that even possible or practical? If you start off with your 3 paragraphs and then, you're looking for answers, you're looking for content, and everything gets completely redone, how do you parse that? I don't think you can in text. And I'm not quite sure if you can do that either when you're creating this plush toy. How many changes are you making? There's no 7 changes rule, which has always come up in my many years of practice. Doesn't exist. So even though the Copyright Office may think it has figured out a way to finesse this, I'm not so sure. And on the patent side, human authorship is also an absolute requirement. And the Patent Office did ask for comments, and those comments had to be submitted by May 15th. So we'll see what the Patent Office does with it. But it's a fascinating field right now. So many questions, maybe not so many legal answers at this point in time.
Amy, one thing I want to add to what you said, which I think is really interesting, if we go back to the framework I started with on automation, AI, and generative AI, I think a lot of the places where people get tripped up is they're using generative AI to try to solve a needle in the haystack AI problem. So let me give a quick distinction, right? When I was asking ChatGPT a month ago for a bio on myself, it said I had a master's degree. I didn't have, had a couple factual errors in there. And so it is not yet at the point to where if you ask it a question and you want it to find the needle in the haystack, it is going to do that with the level of accuracy that people would want. It's getting better and better every day. It's continuing to improve. So I would separate out the use cases where you've got an AI to go find the one right answer, like the attorney getting cited in that court case, versus you're asking the AI to go generate some kind of new content where there is no right answer. Right. So a thank you note, thank you email template, there is no one best way to thank a client. It's a really good task for a generative AI type of use case. If you're wanting it to find an answer about some, kind of discrete court case from 10 years ago, it's gonna give you its best guess. And so from my vantage point, what we've seen with clients is clients do best when they separate out, I need to go create new content, and I want to use the generative AI to do that. Help me write new content, write a blog post, write an email, versus I want to go find information on the internet, versus I want to go find information within my own corpus of knowledge, where it's in my own SharePoint or it's in my own intranet, it's within my own walls of my office, sort of thing. So if you can just kind of separate out what those use cases look like, you can say, okay, here's some really good applications of this technology, and here's some places where it's not always going to meet the mark.
David, I think you're 100% right there. And I do think there's a misconception that people have, and I think you summarized it well, that language models are data tools, like they're for finding data. And that's not really true. I like to think of them more as logic tools or reasoning tools in a way. And you have to provide them the reference data essentially in order for them to put that data in a format that you want it in. They're almost formatting tools, and that's where the generative part comes in. But I think you're exactly right. Like if you wanted to find the correct information in your company's knowledge base, you have to have a tool that is able to find the relevant information, feed that to the LLM as reference, and then it can use that in order to produce the correct answer.
Yeah, the issues that happen with our practice on the creative end is what I was saying. If you're using it to create new material that is going to be important to your company to own and protect, then we have to be really cognizant of those copyright and patent issues. If you're using it as a tool to sort through contracts, to compare clauses in those contracts, that's a great use case for AI, because then you're developing consistency in your contract management. And there may be contractual provisions you didn't even realize were there. And you can also scan your vendor agreements. Half the time when I'm asking clients, okay, what are your obligations to these vendors? They don't know. So we go back to the vendor agreement and they look at it and they say, oh my God, I'm indemnifying the vendor. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Mind you, everyone on the call, this is something that you should absolutely look at. But those are great use cases. The interesting area is the creatives, when you're actually creating products and you want to be able to protect them, and you might not be able to at this point in time because the laws are so 20th century.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add to that, Amy, is when you think of start with the good use cases. One of the things that we've seen is no matter how good the AI is, and obviously, Capacity's got 1,500 customers. We're doing this in document mining and chatbots and email interceptors and voice and SMS and all the goodies. no matter how good the system is, though, you have to have that escape hatch, that co-pilot, that person to help you out. So like when we started, I'm happy to share these numbers on this Vistage crew. If you asked our bot a question, 100 questions back in 2017, it would answer 55 of them, and then 10 of those would get thumb down. So about 45% positive answer rate out of that set. If I fast forward to today, and I just looked at our most recent numbers, if you ask our bot 100 questions, 92 of them will get answered automatically, and one of those will get thumb down. Now that's internal primarily, so we're not scanning the whole web, but primarily for your internal use cases, right? But no matter if it's 1% or 10%, or whether it's 50% unanswered or 8% unanswered, what you do with the worst experience is what is going to make or break the adoption of that AI tool. So if you ask it a question, doesn't know the answer, how do you escalate that up to a person? If you ask it a question, the answer is not right, or there's something that needs to be fixed, how do you make sure that gets flagged? The worst experience you can have with an AI tool is the experience I had recently at UPS, where I was looking for a package, talked with the chatbot. Chatbot didn't answer my question. It didn't know that it didn't answer my question, and it didn't have a way to escalate up to go bring somebody in. So you want to kind of flip that around. You want to have a high answer rate. You want it to know if it doesn't know the answer, what to go do, and you want to go get it in front of somebody who can help you improve that. So those are just some principles we've seen. So if you're a contract mining, intelligent document processing bot, gets 9 out of your 10 contracts, and 1 out of 10 it can't read from for some reason, you want to be able to have a way to flag that, escalate it up, bring someone in.
Yeah, David, I think you're raising a great point that these are non-deterministic models. And as you know, they don't have 100% success rate. They're very much like humans in that way, in the sense that sometimes they mess up. And there are certain things you can do to try to guard against that. But it's not like traditional automation or algorithms where you just put it into place and it works 100% of the time. There's a little bit of non-determinism in its answers. But also, as you were demonstrating, like the technology is just amazing. It helps increase the how much customers are enjoying the responses and how good the accuracy rate is and everything. So great points.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I do want to point out that I think what's really important for businesses who are considering employing AI technologies is saying to the employees, this is what we want you to do with the technology. That way, the employees who are the 69% of employees who are using it and haven't told their employers, I'm kind of wondering what their IT people are doing, but that's another question entirely. Then they have agency and they have comfort because they know exactly how they're supposed to be using the tool. They can make recommendations to their bosses saying, listen, I could focus on the real hard thinking that I need to do to generate these financial models if I can use this tool in this way. But it's really critical that you have the appropriate guidelines for use that take into account the limitations of the technology as well as the legal limitations. So I think that's really the takeaway that we're all talking about, is that employees need to understand what it is that they are permitted to do and what they're not permitted to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. So bringing it back to some of the questions that we've had is, what kind of policies are you seeing people put in place in terms of allowing experimentation or without making any sensitive data available?
So from a legal standpoint, that's the first one, is you cannot input any confidential information. If you don't know whether the information is confidential or not, ask. Mm-hmm. There's no harm in asking. Second, you've got to realize how are you using and what are you using? So those are really important. Everyone has to understand, okay, this is permitted. ChatGPT is permitted for this kind of use, or it's not. Who is responsible when you have the output? Who's going to be looking at it? Where does that responsibility lie? So these guidelines are not one-offs. These are particular to each company, depending on what they're using and how they're using it. So, have the guidelines posted on the intranet, have a town hall meeting so people can ask questions. And this is not just one and done. This is a continuing process because the technology is continuing to evolve. And so your use cases are going to be different if you're a creative company producing plush toys or mugs or any products and designs versus a contract management company that is, putting in as the data set all of its contracts from the last 20 years. So really different. The point is, have the guidelines, know what you're doing, and train your employees.
Yeah. And I want to say, just from a technical perspective, I think obviously echo everything Amy said, obviously spot on. But when I work with companies, there's a couple different companies have different risk appetites, essentially, for what kind of information they want to put in there, what kind of level of security they want. And there's a couple of different layers you can take. And one is just get the paid version of ChatGPT and turn off training. With the free version, training is always on, so your data is potentially being used to train those models. So you get the paid version, you turn off training, but then you have to make sure that everyone has training turned off and make sure that they don't accidentally or intentionally turn it on at any point. So how do you get beyond that? Well, you can essentially deploy the service onto your intranet, onto your virtual private cloud. And that will allow it so that there's no training. You go out over API, requires a little bit more sophistication, but it does remove that those security risks or those a bit of that proprietary information risk. And then on top of that, if you're even more concerned, you can deploy an open source model on your intranet. And so you have complete control over the model. You are in charge of when it expands in terms of capabilities, but you know that data is not going to anyone else.
The other thing is, depending on how confidential the material is, you may want to limit it to certain people. So it's not the entire 800, 900 person company. It's these engineers working on that particular project are the ones using that instance.
We're seeing a lot of our members using this to create marketing content. And that, we definitely have heard from some other speakers about how this is a great solid first draft. We've heard the challenges of the accuracy and that it needs to be checked. I think Daniel Pink said that it's a matter of writing, creative prompts. How can you be distinctive in what you're prompting, and then applying a layer of taste. So if it's on brand with the kind of words that you use or accurate. But we had a question about generating AI content and then checking it for either plagiarism and adjusting to make it your own. What is the balance between that? Amy said, the 7 changes or something like that. What's the kind of balance that you could put in place to say this now is not AI generated, but has sufficient human input?
So as I said, that's going to be pretty difficult to do when you're talking about text. As far as plagiarism is concerned, one of the first uses that Grammarly offered was a plagiarism checker, and I advise everyone who's using any AI product to use the Grammarly plagiarism checker. It's not perfect. It will bring you over to the actual citation. Let's say you've got something in quotes, but that's useful too, because then you see the source. So otherwise, you've really got to be careful and curate it, and in some cases rewrite it. So if you know the source, and that Grammarly will provide for you, then you can really check if there is true plagiarism or just citation and make sure the citations are correct. What you don't know, if you can't see the exact source of all of the text, is whether they are taking, based on your prompt, your competitor's material. So there still has to be some level of curation, and it all depends on the level of risk, as Ross properly identified with the company. Now, what you can do is take all of your own marketing material and look through it. So you're not wasting time, and it's going to be on brand. So those are the next step products that are going to be offered.
Thank you. We've had a couple questions about cyber attacks, and I know, Amy, that's another area of your expertise. So AI is increasing the velocity and number of cyber attacks because just like we're using this to be more efficient, I assume that bad actors are also using AI to create new ways to access data or increase cyber risk. So what can companies do to mitigate the risks from AI?
Training, 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 and more training. Because this is happening because people are clicking on links. You're not seeing those attempts that are not in English any longer. You're seeing things that are very, very sophisticated. Just dealt with one where money went where it shouldn't, and it was through someone clicking. You know, we've changed our protocols for payment. That's a really common one. Everything that you get, especially when they're asking for money, needs to be checked. You know, pick up the phone. Don't send an email because their email could be compromised. Pick up the phone, talk to a human and say, hey, did you send me an email that where you know, you changed where the payment is going? So, and slow down. I'm in New York. We're not known for slowing down, but this is what I say when I speak. Is you've got to give your people authority to slow down. And these are very sophisticated now. There's one going around with DocuSign, looks exactly like the real thing. So if you didn't expect somebody to be sending you a DocuSign request, slow down, ask. Again, and training. People, you need to train this over and over and over and over again as the scams get more and more sophisticated. Now there's deep fakes because it looks like me, it looks like David, it looks like Ann, it looks like Ross. Sounds like David, Ann, and Ross. Sounds like Amy. So again, slow down, think, just put on your buyer beware hat. And this is, again, I don't know which budget it's coming out of, but you've got to budget for this. It's not one and done. Many state laws require annual training. We train all the time. You know, every other day we get a training module. So because we've got tons of confidential information. So it's really critical. But I'm sure that the techies have even more practical advice for us.
Well, I just want to echo exactly what you were saying. You were saying pick up the phone, right? And then you were saying there are deep fakes. It is possible. I don't know if you saw this. I think it was 60 Minutes. There was a segment where a cybersecurity professional came in and essentially cloned the showrunner's voice, and then called up the showrunner's assistant in the showrunner's voice and said, "Hey, I'm planning for travel. Can you give me my passport number?" And of course, the assistant gave her the passport number because why not? It was her boss's voice, right? In the past, voice has been a unique authenticator of identity, but that is not necessarily the case anymore, which is just wild. For today, you can go get your voice completely cloned and it sounds unmistakably real. Like it's wild. So we have to be, like, what I can say for myself and my family, we put together a passphrase, essentially. There's a question that you ask if things seem fishy, and then you have to give the right answer. Maybe you want to do that with your banker, with your CEO, or anyone else in your company, obviously. It's wild times that we're entering.
Excellent. All right. I think we're all sufficiently scared. Let's get back to maybe some of the opportunity that comes with the AI. First, I wanted to, just with the lay of the land, with the tools that exist today, I was particularly interested, Ross, when you talked about paid versus free, because that is a question that we got. And that was interesting that the free version, so all of your prompts and all of your questions are being used to train the AI to do it better in the future if you're using a free version. Is that what you're saying?
I guess I'll say that they have the option to do that. Essentially, you agree to that if you use the the free version. Now, okay. I should also warn that even if you have the paid version, by default, training is turned on. Mm-hmm. So you need to make sure that you explicitly go into your settings and turn it off. Now, on top of that, you deploy this to 20 employees, whatever it is, you have to make sure that everybody has it turned off, because if anyone has it turned on, Any of their information can be used to train the future models. So that's worth noting. And then I know we had a comment in here to kind of expand on that. It is possible that your information shows up in a future model if you don't have training turned off. Now, an alternative to that is to use a service or to deploy a service internally that calls OpenAI through the API. They say that any calls through the API are not trained. Now, that's great, but if you are using a third-party service, I know there's a ton of like meeting notes services, presentation creators, they're using the API, so their data is not going to be used to train OpenAI, but then you have to think about it's going on to their servers, right? So then the question is, what are they doing with your data? You know, so that's another area that I'm sure Amy's thought about, but we have to be careful of that as well. And so that's really where there's value in considering whether you want to kind of own the whole chain and deploy onto your virtual private cloud.
So talking about training, someone referenced that their marketing strategist had informed them of the impacts that AI has on the Google and SEO search. So how can a company ensure that they're going to get recognized by AI? Is it, maybe too late right now because it's only 2021, but what are the efforts that they can do to make sure they're recognized in the future?
I mean, from a search perspective, you still want to have great, unique content. I think the concept of the AI is a really good first draft and a really poor final draft, at least today, in terms of uniqueness, in terms of having something that's going to add value to search engines. I think it's a great kind of framework to think about. I would piggyback on what Amy said. Like if you're trying to copyright your content, you probably don't want the AI writing a good chunk of it. If you're writing a marketing blog post and you want to generate some ideas, I kind of think of these systems as great listicle creators. You want to go add that into your marketing blogs. It's a great way to get started. The other thing that we've seen from just from adoption of AI relative to lead gen and Google is that folks deploying chatbots on their website are driving engagement up. And so Google does take into account time spent on site, dwell time on pages. People go to the site quick and bounce out. So that's another aspect that we see folks saying, hey, if I want to help improve my rankings, got to have a bot on the site, if only just to drive my average time on site up. We had one credit union who was doing a big marketing push. They, in about an 18-month time frame, they grew their assets under management by about 50%. They deployed a bot on their website. Their calls going into their contact center went down by 25%. So 50% bigger business, 25% fewer calls. And when they measured their member sat before and after the rollout, the sat went up by about 10 points. So it's a really good cocktail of bigger business, lower cost, higher sat, and then ultimately more time spent on the site.
And then to add on to what David's saying, exactly. I mean, whether for good or bad, the answer to showing up in future models is probably exactly the same as the answer to showing up in a Google search. You just want to be popular. You want to, like David said, have that engagement. You want to make sure you have valuable content because of the way that these models work. You take a snapshot of the internet and you feed that into the model to find patterns in the data. Essentially, the more often you appear in that training data, the more likely you are going to come up in an answer. So again, you just want to be everywhere, essentially.
Okay,
But
so
as I
looking,
said-
go
sorry.
ahead. No,
As
go
I
ahead.
said earlier, I don't think AI is replacing people. I think we are going to continue to need people to curate. And this frees up people to do all of the deep thinking that companies need to stay competitive. So I don't see it, at least not yet, as a replacement tool. I really don't. I think we're at the very beginning. And I think we still need the humans, and we need, smart humans who are looking at this and through a critical lens. And we also need business investment. So this is definitely a line item for businesses, which, as David just pointed out, can generate income.
One question about the safety of using this, and I assume within an application, so you integrating your CRM data into AI tools. Are you giving away customer data? So it sounds like API is an issue. It sounds like you wouldn't want to be giving it to AI, rather employing an AI plugin in your existing CRM. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there are different ways of looking at that. I mean, like you were saying, existing CRMs are going to deploy their own versions of these products. It does depend on whether you want to enhance the functionality that they've got. Most CRMs do offer APIs that allow you to securely plug into them through OAuth authentication. And so you have to trust your data vendor. I mean, this isn't really anything new, right? The last 10, 20 years, we've been in cloud environments. We understand other companies have access to your data to some extent. We trust Microsoft, we trust Google, we trust Amazon in these different ways. You have to be careful for sure, but there is some level of trusting the vendor who's going to implement the software, right? But yeah, you can use an API to plug into that, or you can use the functionality that it already has naturally.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time. Thank you so much, Amy, David, and Ross. Again, these are Vistage speakers in our community who share their insights. I just had one last question actually for you, and that is, you talked about training. Is it the social responsibility of small and mid-sized businesses, of our leaders, to help their employees understand personal, political, societal risks surrounding AI? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're entering a new era. This is not a page turn or a chapter turn. This is a throw out the book in terms of how the way that the world is going to work. I heard somebody say, if you thought the internet was a big change to life, AI is going to vastly eclipse that from how impactful the internet has been. So if you think of it in those terms, we are entering an entirely new world. And yeah, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a lot of folks speaking up on how we can create a better society with this technology.
Great. Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having the people with whom you work be right there with you, determining how their jobs can be more effective using AI, and to me, absolutely, the answer is yes. Because how else, if you want to grow your business, you're not imposing AI on your people. Your people are saying, this is what I need to do to be more effective. So there's no I in team. And the more educated everyone is, the better it is for your business and the better it is for your wider community.
And finally, Ross.
Yeah. So, I mean, exactly like Amy was saying, there's kind of two sides of educating about AI or training on AI. One is the practical side. And we saw what Amy was talking about with the lawyer. If you don't know how it works, using it can actually end up worse than if you didn't use it at all. So you need to know how to use it from a practical standpoint. But then there is that societal implication, and that is a social responsibility that I do agree. This is completely paradigm shifting, and we all have a responsibility essentially to make sure that as a society, we're adopting this responsibly and that we're putting it in place responsibly, because it is going to alter our lives on a daily basis, all of us.
Excellent. Great way to end a very dynamic conversation, both here and in the chat. So thank you to our presenters for answering some of the questions in the chat as well. So for our attendees, thank you all. We'll be sending a link to today's recording and slides within 24 hours. And also be sure to join us for our upcoming webinars. Exclusively for our members on July 14th, ITR Economics returns with Brian Bolio sharing in this Vistage exclusive their latest forecasts. And on August 25th, we have a Vistage exclusive session with best-selling author and organizational psychologist Adam Grant, who's going to share how rethinking can help both leaders and organizations. So our members can register for these sessions on My Vistage. Now, upcoming webinars available to everyone include Managing Workforce Velocity, Improving Employee Retention. That's on August 4th with Vistage Chief Research Officer Joe Galvin. And on September 8th, we have the opportunity to hear from the 2022 Vistage Speaker of the Year, Robert Cujo Teschner, who will share a small peek into the world of high performance teams and help us understand the upside of accountability practiced correctly. His presentation is titled De-Weaponizing Accountability for High Performing Teams. So be sure to register for those as well. So those public sessions are up now for registration at vistage.com/webinar. That's vistage.com/webinar. Thank you to our presenters and to our attendees today. Be safe and be well.